Okay. Hi, I'm Clay Fong, dining critic for the Boulder Daily Camera, and I'm fortunate here to be here today with Anthony Lucero, who wrote, directed, and produced East Side Sushi, which screened as one of the dinner and a movie features as part of the Flatirons Food Film Festival this spring. So good to see you, Anthony.
Hi, Clay. Good to see you again.
Excellent. So I've got a couple of questions for you, after viewing the film. And it's kind of interesting because I sort of picked up, I think, stuff on the second viewing that I hadn't on the first. But I think a question that I understand you get asked a lot, and it certainly sort of came to mind for me, is how did you come up with this particular story?
Um, it's funny. I've had people ask me who is the real person behind,
Hmm.
like as though it's based off a real person. But no, it's not based off anybody. But the seed of it started many years ago. I was sitting in a diner, and I saw this guy. He was Latino. He was washing dishes in the back of the kitchen, and I thought, I was like, I wonder what this guy aspires to be. Maybe he aspires to own this place, or maybe he just wants to be a cook in this really sort of divey, greasy spoon restaurant. Maybe that's everything to him. So I thought, well, why don't I write that story? It seemed challenging to write a short story and make it enjoyable, make it sort of epic, right? A
Right.
dishwasher who wants to be a cook. So I was like, let's just do it. And if the audience could sort of go on that ride with him, then I've done my job as a writer. So it was just as a little exercise I did. So I
Okay.
started writing this story, and then I thought I think I was eating sushi probably like a week later or maybe the next day, and I thought, ooh, maybe this guy wants to become a sushi chef, and then I sort of like those dynamics of Mexican and Japanese cultures colliding. And so I started writing that story. He wants to become a sushi chef, a little bit more dynamic. So then I realized I knew nothing about what it takes to become a sushi chef. So I stopped writing and I started researching. And I took some sushi classes. I started interviewing set chefs. I started hanging out in restaurants. I started hanging out in the backs of the kitchen to see like how the flow works between the front and the back, between the sushi chefs and the back of the kitchen. And as I started to interview sushi chefs about their jobs, it dawned on me I've never seen a woman behind the sushi counter doing this.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, that's really had never dawned on me before. So I was like, okay, I think I was probably 20 minutes into the screenplay, and I just dumped it out and started over with a woman this time.
Hmm.
And then it just kind of just went from there. But that was sort of how it started. Yeah.
One of the really appealing things about this, and we had talked a little about this in the discussion after the film, is why is it that sushi is so compelling versus, say, other things? If this had been about somebody baking loaves of bread, maybe it wouldn't have been quite as much of a grabber. And, what are your thoughts about, you know, why is it that sushi sort of resonates with so many people being a thing that, many decades ago was kind of exotic. Now you can go into any grocery store and find it. So
Right.
what do you think is the appeal of sushi and how does it contribute to your film?
Yeah, it is interesting, right? I would say like maybe 20 years ago, sushi was something that people didn't eat. It's like, oh God, it's raw fish. It's like, oh, I'm not gonna eat that. And then it became this cuisine that everybody loves and adores and eats everywhere. And you can find it in supermarkets. Um, but yeah, I think for me, first off, it was culturally, right? Just because sushi is Japanese, that
Right.
was one of the first choices of it becoming sushi. And actually, it was going to be teppanyaki, the first round of the
Okay.
script. And that was, if you go to Benihana's and places like that,
Right.
still mostly male dominated, right? And
Hmm.
I just thought it would be fun and visual to see like the slapping of the spatulas and they flips and all that. But then that got dropped early on. But also, sushi is very cinematic looking. It's very beautiful. It's
Hmm.
very simple and elegant. And I thought visually, it's a very beautiful piece of cuisine to shoot. And again, it's like I was thinking, well, maybe he wants to make French food or French cuisine, and that's very beautiful looking too. and sushi. But yeah, it's I think sushi is also the most magical cuisine out there.
Right.
You know, it's a notch above everything else. Yeah.
You know, and I understand now you live in Southern California, but
Yep.
I believe at the time you were making the film, you were up in Northern California
Yep.
doing visual effects. And one thing that really kind of hit me on the second viewing is, you know, and having grown up in the East Bay, it's Oakland is almost a character in it. And, you know, I feel the story might have been different if it was set in Los Angeles or San Francisco. And, you know, having spent time in the Bay Area, what are your sort of reflections on that?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Oakland. And
Mhm.
my goal, nobody made films in Oakland.
Right,
Maybe San Francisco. San Francisco was always the charming city, the darling
right.
city. Oakland was always in the shadows.
Yes.
And so my goal was to make a film in Oakland. I was very proud of Oakland. It's very expensive to live in Oakland now, but back when I was
Yeah.
making the film, it was still relatively cheap, and it's always had high crime rates, and at least
Mhm.
many years ago. Now it doesn't, but yeah, I thought Oakland was, again, cinematic, just like the
Right.
sushi. And that's only if you've lived in Oakland, you could see how cinematic it is, how like the
Mhm.
Grand Lake, how beautiful, or Lake Merritt, how beautiful that is, and how culturally diverse it is, and how many different colors there are in Oakland. And I just thought this is the perfect backdrop for any kind of film. There's so many stories to be told in Oakland. So I did, in an earlier cut of East Side Sushi, there was much more Oakland. I would just cut away to this B-roll of Oakland, and I shot quite a bit of it because I was so proud I lived there, and it's like I wanted to showcase the city. And then, you know, after the film gets too long, you start making all these, you start chopping scenes, chopping, and then he's like, well, I got to chop some of Oakland too.
Mhm.
But yeah, and I think more so in the screenplay, Oakland was more of a character in the film, and
Mhm.
then eventually it sort of gets pared down a bit, but it's still, it is sort of the heart of where the story takes place. And I don't think it would have been a different film in LA, or the story couldn't take place in maybe New York, you know, but it's definitely a story that can take place in Oakland specifically. And
And,
I was just very proud to film it there.
and you know what was kind of, and again, having grown up there, but it's just interesting how I think you did a really good job of capturing some of the specific neighborhoods. You know, like, okay, you get a sense that Fruitvale is maybe different from where the sushi bars are on like Grand Avenue and Piedmont Avenue. And I'm just sort of curious, like, were you growing up, did you spend time in those different neighborhoods or, you know, did you have familiarity with them?
I was familiar with most of Oakland.
Hmm.
And actually, I get asked, where does the East Side portion of the
Right.
title come from? And I grew up on the East Side of Oakland, and it was very distinct. East Side,
Yeah.
growing up, we had this slang. It would be graffitied on the walls, ESO, East Side Oakland. So
Okay.
East Side Oakland was a very Latino dominated area.
Hmm.
Still is, pretty much. The Fruitvale district is
Right.
very, it has a big Latino population there.
Hmm.
So yeah, it is sort of sectioned off Oakland. It's now people have sort of, they're not so fearful to live in the East Side
Right.
anymore. So
Right.
people like migrated over. Um, but yeah, I grew up in East Oakland as well.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to, it was sort of a little bit of a love letter to East Oakland
Yeah.
as well. So, and I wanted it reflected in the title, but I do get people asking, like, why is it East? And, you know,
Right.
it's funny. It probably could have taken place in East LA too. And some
Hmm.
people mistakenly, you know, they'd write about the film. They'd say, East, it, you know, takes place in East LA. It's like, no, it's East Oakland actually, because
Right.
East LA is very high Latino population as well. But
Hmm.
yeah, but anyway, little bit of background about the title.
Nice. Thank you. My understanding too is that your initial kind of impulse was you wanted to do most of the casting out of the Bay Area, but I understand that was sort of challenging. So if you could maybe tell us a little background about how the casting went, in particular, how you found your lead.
The lead, Deanna Torres. So yes, I did want all of the cast to be from at least the Bay Area,
Hmm.
um, and also financially, you know, I produced the film, I funded the film, and I couldn't afford to go outside of
Sure.
the Bay Area to look for talent. So I kept looking for Juana. I kept looking for that lead, and I kept looking for Aki, and I couldn't find them in the Bay Area. So I knew I had to come to LA, and it's nothing wrong with that. It's just financially, it was difficult because then I had to fly the person up to Oakland, and I had to house these actors, and I'm paying for this film for, you know, pennies. And it's like, I got to figure out how, and luckily I had two friends that opened up their homes for the actors to stay in while shooting. So I was able to get that. But yeah, so went down to LA looking for Juana, and I spent a couple of days there casting, and I had sort of hand selected everybody that I wanted to come in to audition for. I saw their reels and I thought, yes, they could fit. Deanna, the funny thing is, I don't remember selecting Deanna to come in, and I don't know why or how, but anyway, she's there in the lobby waiting to come in. And yeah, she walks into the audition, and immediately I was like, nope, this is not the one. She was too young. She was very thin. She was very pale skin. And, you know, I wanted somebody darker brown, because if you see any of the women that work that cut fruit and sell fruit on on like East 14th in Oakland, they're very brown because they're in the sun all day, and they're strong women. It's like they're lifting these boxes of fruit all day. So I wanted somebody a little with, you know, more meat on them. And, you know, it's like, it's my own film. I don't need to cast anybody beautiful. I was just like, I want somebody that looks real. That's all. And Deanna was like, you know, pretty. And I was like, no, it's not going to work. So, but she came in, let's just have her do a page or two, and we'll politely say thank you. And so she started auditioning, and it was the first time, and she started doing the lines. It's the first time that it sounded like how I wrote it in my head. The voice was like, that's the voice I'm looking for. So had her do another page, and she did great. And then the third scene, she just knocked it out of the park. That's the scene where she quits, and I'm like she's it. She is the one. So I had to modify the script because my original screenplay, she's older, and so I had to make the biggest change was the daughter. I had to make her daughter. Her daughter was supposed to be a teenager, and so I had to then change the daughter to be 8 years old in the script, and it worked out fine. But and then eventually Deanna did gain some weight for the role. She actually just asked me. She's like, "Do you think I should gain some weight for this role?" I was like, yes, that would be great. So she gained an extra 15 pounds, although she's still thin on screen. She's 15 pounds heavier. And then we just spray tanned her. We would just, every week, we just put her into a booth and just spray tan her. And yeah, and then she became Juana. So yeah.
I understand too, your original intent was to do some cutaways with the knife work, but she was able to address that?
Yeah, that was, yeah, great if I were to find an actress that could also chop really fast. And that was always in the screenplay. It was always intended that Juana would chop just lightning speed. And it just tells a backstory that she's worked with a knife, and she's done this a long time. And so I had always planned on having a hand double. And we were actually looking for hand doubles that would match her hands. And, you know, I worked in visual effects. So, you know, you film the hands chopping, blah, 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 blah. And then the camera, it's called like a takeover, where the camera tilts up, and then you go to the actress, you know, and you do this sort of like a morph to the actress. So I'd always planned on doing that. And she just on her own, she didn't tell me she was taking these classes, but in probably 2 months or so, she chopped all day, all night. She just chopped cucumbers. And she sends me a video of her she learned how to do it on her own. And that was probably the first, I don't know, like the moment where I was like, this person's becoming real. You know, it's like, oh my God, she's doing it. So it was a fantastic moment when she sent me that video of her chopping. So yeah, and that's just how she is. I mean, Deanna was fantastic to work with. I want to work with her again. And she made my script work. She made it sing, and she made that character come to life.
Given your background in visual effects, and I know that you have a very sort of lengthy resume, working on a lot of visual effects, kind of heavy blockbusters, how was it to transition to telling a story that's, much more intimate? There's not a heck of a lot of special effects in the film and very character driven. Was that challenging, or is it something that you've always kind of wanted to do?
Well, I've always wanted to work in visual effects.
Mhm.
And when you start working in visual effects, I did it for many years, you start to realize that a lot of the scripts, the storytelling rely heavily on the visuals and not so much on the story. So I had decided, and it's very expensive. So if I'm going to make a film, it has to not have any visual effects in it. But I thought, okay, that's the next challenge is I want to make a film that actually does rely on story and heart and characters and acting, and forget about everything else, forget about all the explosions and dinosaurs, and let's just make, I just wanted to make a beautiful little film and not rely on any other tricks. So that was a huge goal. And that just comes from working years and years and years on these heavy visual effects films where, you pour your heart, or at least your time and into those films. And then when they come out, you're like, they could have done a little bit better on the story. So after doing that for so many years, I had to tell myself, you got to stop complaining about this and do something, because it's difficult to make a film. It's difficult to make a film. It's difficult to make a good film. And so it's like, you got to shut up and do something about it, or just keep working, keep your mouth shut, So I decided I'll do something about it.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good segue into my last question, which is what's next for you?
What's next? Well, before the whole shelter in place was going on, I was starting to work on my next screenplay. Billy Dreams of Bagging is a story about a boy, mentally, physically challenged boy who learns how to bag groceries because his mother is dying of cancer. And so he needs to become self-sufficient. So it was a Sundance semifinalist last year, and then we were starting to work on that this year. So that's the next project, but we're still looking for funding. So if there's anybody wealthy out there that wants to fund it, please let me know. But that's next amongst other projects I'm writing.
Great. Are there any thoughts you would want to leave viewers of East Side Sushi with?
Oh gosh. No, I mean, just thank you for taking the time to watch the film. Thank you to Flatirons for showing it and promoting it. And because the film has always been just by word of mouth. We've never campaigned, we've never had advertising for it. And it's still amazing that years later, it still continues. It still finds an audience. It's still, people tweet about it. And I'm always thankful and surprised that it's still in circulation. So, and it's just by word of mouth. So just thank you to everybody who just does a little post about it. It's just, it's fantastic. Thank you for everybody who does that and writes about it.
And it's available on Amazon Prime, correct?
It's on Amazon Prime. It is on Canopy. It is on, I think, YouTube with commercials, but it's free. Or IMDb, I believe it is right now. But, it constantly circulates in different areas. But I think, IMDb, Canopy, and Amazon Prime.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Anthony, thank you. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Clay.
Can't wait for the next movie.
All right. Thanks a lot. All right. Take care. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay.